What's up, everybody? Cody Bidlow with sprintingworkouts.com and ATHLETE.X. So I'm coming back from COVID, and as a result of that, I kind of got to start back at square one. So right now, my goal is really just to build back up my work capacity, get my strength back, and then, keep on progressing kind of from where I left off prior to getting sick. Before I got sick, I was in pretty good shape overall. Like, I was able to do 250, 200, 150 for a couple sets, 3 minutes rest in between. I was able to hang clean 315. So I was feeling good, but what can you do? Sometimes you just get sick, So now as a result of that, I'm definitely weaker than I was before, but I'm building back up. So today I did 5 120s, 3 minutes rest in between, 75 to 80% intensity level, and it felt pretty good. Last time I was out here, I could only do 2 runs, so doing 5 is a pretty good progression, and I'm sure that within a week or two, I should be back to where I was prior to getting sick. Now, I think it's important to consider that as athletes and as coaches, we all have a certain bias in how our philosophy is set up or what system of training we use. And I think it's important to have a philosophy or have a certain system of training that you follow. But at a certain point, if you get too glued to that or you get too locked into one way of thinking, you can start to neglect certain aspects of training. And for me, I tended to neglect tempo endurance training. There's a number of reasons for that. One is I did a lot of over distance running in college, worked for a little while, but then I got hurt and I got kind of, turned off to all that. Also, when I was at Altus, that was during a time where the current thing in vogue was to sort of neglect longer running and just focus on speed, acceleration, and that sort of thing. But as a result of doing mostly speed work and acceleration work for the past however many years, I've noticed that there is a diminishing returns effect if all you're doing is high intensity sprinting. On one hand, it can be pretty harsh on your body to just run fast all the time. It beats up your tendons, your joints, that sort of thing. So you can only do so much of that within a week. But if all you're doing is speed work all the time, then you're really missing out on developing your cardiovascular system, on how many strides you can do within a workout, how much distance you can actually cover in a workout. And even though the intensity level of a tempo workout is relatively low compared to our speed days, there's still a skill development aspect you can get out of running around the track at 75%. There's, certain tissue adaptations you can get. There's an amount of volume you can get in your program that you couldn't get any other way. And I think when you do tempo endurance work, as long as it's in an appropriate volume and distances that are appropriate to your skill level, it can be very supportive of your abilities to run fast. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we want to get to the point where we're running hundreds or 200s fast in competition, then we have to eventually do long speed endurance or special endurance training. But if you've only been doing acceleration and speed work on the track, how are you going to progress to running, 150s or 250s all out when there's a huge gap between what you've exposed your body to and then what you're expecting it to be able to handle in those speed endurance or special endurance workouts? So my philosophy now, and this has always kind of been my philosophy, but it's more just that I'm applying it to myself as opposed to only applying it to the people I coach, simply because I was kind of just being lazy for a long time, is to develop the two qualities in parallel. So we develop acceleration, we develop speed with certain types of workouts, but we also need to develop general fitness and conditioning abilities with other types of workouts. And we need to develop those in parallel, so that way at a certain point we can combine those two qualities into what would be long speed endurance or special endurance training. If you're going to run a 200 in competition and you're not doing special endurance work, then you're leaving performance on the table. But you can't simply progress. Well, you can do whatever you want, but you're not going to get the best effects out of your training if you go from running 30s, 40s, and 50s into running a 250 all out for your special endurance work. We have to build up to that. So how do we build up to that? Well, like I said, we develop the qualities in parallel. We develop the speed qualities because special endurance and speed endurance work needs to be super high intensity. So we need to have speed qualities baked into our system through acceleration and speed work. But we also need the work capacity to be able to run long enough to expose our bodies to that type of training. So by doing the acceleration and the speed work in some of your sessions and then backing that up with tempo endurance work like 120s, 150s, 180s, 200s, 250s at 75% effort or somewhere around that intensity level, we can build the speed qualities and the conditioning qualities, and then eventually those two paths can cross to the point where we're then doing longer sprints at a high intensity level. But if all we do is the acceleration and speed work, and we just do a complete linear progression from that up to, short speed endurance to long speed endurance, special endurance, having tried that myself with myself as the test subject, I just don't think that you can get as much out of that as compared to if you were to have some amount of lower intensity running built into your program during your preseason or your off season. It doesn't mean you have to go out and run, 2300s or run 600s or anything like that. Maybe if you're a 400 meter runner, you need to bump up the volume to a higher level. But as a 100 and 200 meter athlete, I think doing things like 6 150s, 6 200s, 250, 200, 150 for multiple sets. Workouts like that are going to be very supportive of our ability to progress towards special endurance training, but it allows us to train those, conditioning and fitness related qualities at an intensity level that isn't so stressful that it just crushes us. We can sort of ease our body toward the ability to run a 250 all out by starting at 50, 60%, then bumping up to 70, 75%, 80%, while also progressing our acceleration and speed work at the same time. And then once we get to the point where we can run repeat 200s or 250s or 150s, depending on, the type of athlete you are and what's good for you, once you can do those repeated longer sprints at a lower intensity level and you've done enough acceleration and speed work, then you're going to be able to transition into doing 150s all out, 200s all out, 250s all out. And one of the benefits that you're going to get, not only just the ability to run that distance without breaking down too much, you're also going to get the benefit of being able to recover better between your high intensity efforts. So if you have a well-developed cardiovascular system, well-developed aerobic energy systems in your body, that's going to support your ability to recover between reps at high intensity levels. So even though running, 6 by 150 at 75% effort isn't going to inherently make you faster in and of itself, it will allow you to recover better during those workouts that are going to directly make you faster, because you're not just relying on anaerobic energy systems at that point. You can let the aerobic system in your body help you recover between reps, so you have a higher quality overall session when you're doing speed work, and you're going to be building up that ability to just simply run far enough of a distance to then eventually do speed endurance work. And you're going to have both the speed qualities built up as well as the conditioning qualities built up. And when you have that combination, that allows you to progress properly into long speed endurance and special endurance work. And that stuff can be kind of the cherry on top that'll really push you to the next level. So that way, when it comes time to compete, you can sprint the whole distance of your race without much of an issue. But if you neglect tempo endurance work, it's going to be very hard to get to the point where you can run a 200 all out in competition and not feel like you're dying. Take it from me, as someone who has tried that approach and kind of failed at it, that you have to have some amount of low intensity training in your program, and that low intensity training is going to be supportive of the high intensity qualities that you're trying to develop. You can't look at it simply as, if I'm just running slow, then that's not going to help me run faster. Yeah, you may not get a direct speed enhancement effect out of running slow 150s, but it will build up certain qualities and capacities in your body that will allow you to do the work that you need to do in order to run fast. It comes back to that concept of training to train versus training to perform. During the off season, yes, we need to do some training to perform, which is your acceleration and your speed work, but we also need to do some amount of training to train. Training that helps develop our ability to train in ways that will then, when we transition to training to perform, will allow us to train in a way that helps us perform at a higher level. So we do the tempo endurance work to build our capacity to train, our ability to handle certain volumes and certain intensity levels. And then once we've built those up at lower intensity levels, we'll be able to transition to those really high intensity, longer workouts that will develop our ability to perform. So take it from me, as someone who has tried the speed only approach, it doesn't work. Just like the slow only approach doesn't work, there has to be some balance in your program between slower workouts and faster workouts, shorter workouts and longer workouts. And if you can get that progression, if you can nail that progression, then that's what's going to set you up to run your fastest in competition. So hopefully this makes sense to you guys, that during the off season and during the preseason, we need to be combining both faster, shorter workouts with longer, slower workouts, so that way we can eventually bridge the gap to go from not just fast, short workouts, but eventually do fast, longer workouts that are going to be very relevant for our specific performance needs, like running a 100 or running a 200 in competition. And by doing the speed and the acceleration work in parallel with the tempo endurance work, we can set ourselves up to progress properly and optimally toward speed endurance, long speed endurance, and special endurance work. So hopefully you guys understand what I'm talking about here. Hopefully this makes sense to you guys, but that's all I got for you today. So I'm going to check out. But this is Cody Bidlow of SprintingWorkouts.com and ATHLETE.X signing off.